In this little video, I'm going to be talking about something that I think is probably one of the most overlooked or not talked about accessories for film photography. It's something that I've been using for the last few years, and that is ND filters. So ND filters stands for neutral density, and as you can see, they darken the image slightly, and that will reduce the amount of light that's coming into your camera. This can be beneficial for a number of reasons. Firstly, it will mean that if you've got a higher speed film in your camera already, and then you go, say, into a brighter situation, decide you want to use your camera, and say you've got 400 speed film in your camera, putting this filter on will reduce the amount of light that's coming into your camera. That will mean that you can use either slower shutter speeds for more creative photography, so you can start getting into long exposures when it's sort of brighter out, or alternatively it can mean you can use wider apertures and still get usable shots. The advantage of that being either a more blurred background, or you can reduce the effects of what's called diffraction when you use very small apertures, so sort of f16, f22, and stick to sort of f11, f8. These, for instance, these are ND4s. So I've got two of these, one's a backup because this one's scratched. These are ND4s, which are reduce the amount of light coming into the camera by 2 stops. So if I have a 400 speed film, putting these on the camera will then make it behave as if I've got a 100 speed film in the camera. I'll still have the same amount of grain as a 400 film, obviously, but my exposures will be similar to that of a 100 speed film. This can be beneficial, as previously mentioned, and I've done full days shooting with these on the camera and sort of had no problems with that. It's one of those things that if I want, say, a similar look across a whole day of shooting, if I'm going to shoot something and I want a particular look, or if I have a preferred film stock, in my case, that would be Fuji Pro 400 because I like the film, I know how it sort of behaves. But with 400 speed film on a bright sunny day, exposures are going to be either using very small apertures or shutter speeds that I don't have available on my camera, as most film cameras, the older ones, will max out at about 500th of a second. That will mean that you're either using f16 or f22. In order to use sharper apertures, sort of middle apertures, f5.6, f8, f11, you will then be able to use those sharper apertures while also getting usable shutter speeds, which can be essential. So ND filters are often talked about for landscape photography, but they can have benefits for everyday photography. Say you're shooting portraiture and again it's too bright and the film you've got in is too sensitive, then having one of these will allow you a shallower depth of field, meaning that you can get that nice blurred background, which you wouldn't be able to do if you didn't have one of these or you had lower film speed in the camera. So the ND scale goes up in increments of sort of doubles. So ND2 is a 1 stop, ND4 is a 2 stop, which these are, ND6 3 stop, ND8 4 stop, and so on and so on. You get up to ND 1000, which is then 10 stops, which is way too much for most film photography. But they're often overlooked. You can see there are differences in these filters. So this is a much older Hoyer filter, an NDX4, and you can see there's a little bit of green cast to it. Whereas this one, which is a newer one, this is a Hoyer Pro ND4, it's much more neutral. So this is designed for digital, which is why it's slightly more neutral. This is sort of film age, but it's going to be inconsistencies with sort of manufacturing. But you can get good ND filters and you can get bad ND filters. Cheaper ones generally will give you color casts. So you'll have a color cast on your pictures, maybe magenta, maybe green, and that can either be edited away in post, or if you're using film, that can then sometimes interact with, if you're using color film especially, that can then pose an issue because it will not be a consistent cast depending on your film. But I wouldn't worry too much about that. If you're just getting into it, picking up ND filters is fairly easy. Try the cheap ones and see what you think. But yeah, investing, especially if you have a decent camera or you're going to be using photos professionally or you're wanting to sort of add them to a portfolio, having a decent ND filter will be sort of ideal. The older filters you can find normally sort of £5–10 for the older Hoya stuff. The newer stuff, they're getting harder and harder to find in the lower ND numbers. So this was one of the last ND4s that I could get my hands on brand new. They will be sort of 40–50 quid normally, depending on the strength. But yeah, it's getting harder and harder to buy them new. So sticking to secondhand is probably a good option. So yeah, I think that is something that most people overlook and something that I think is, yeah, worth investing in if you are just getting into film photography. So I'm going to leave this video here. If you enjoyed watching this video, please leave a like. If you really enjoyed watching this video, you can subscribe. If you've used ND filters in the past, if you're a film photographer or digital photographer, then leave it in the comments and discuss sort of what you liked about it and what the benefits to you were. And yeah, I will leave it there. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.